Carolyn Dube here. What's the play for today? Well, today I'm playing with my latest stencils from over at StencilGirl Products. Now, this is the There Goes the Neighborhood collection, and these stencils also include the corresponding masks of the buildings. So that means you've got a lot of options and possibilities and ways that you can use these. And here in this video, I'm going to show you some of those and show you some of the versatility, because these stencils look like buildings, but I'll show you how to turn them into something very, very abstract. We're also going to do some reverse stenciling, a 2-for-1 kind of technique, as well as, well, there's just lots in here for you. So enough of my talking. Let's dive in and get some paint on those hands. I'm going to start with some gel printing because this is the fastest way to stencil that I've ever found. There's also another reason why it's great is because the gel plate is going to grab those masks and hold them in place. So, and these are from the Tower stencil from the There Goes the Neighborhood collection. And one of the perks of this also is that you can rearrange it, position it, get it right where you want it before you add any of the paint. And I'm being a little bit fussy here about getting it just the way I want because I gently want each of these towers touching each other, but not a lot, just a little bit. I'm going to press them down with my hand, and that allows the gel plate to really grab them. It's going to hold them in place, and it's also going to help reduce any paint going underneath it. That's part of what makes this so absolutely fast. Now, the reason why I put the paint on the top of the gel plate, basically not on top of the stencils or the masks, is that reduces the chance of paint running underneath of them. So if you want a crisp line, if you want those crisp edges to your stencils, when you put the paint on, put it off of them. And I feel like I didn't have quite enough paint here, so if I feel like I need more, all I do is add a bit more. Now, with all of this rolling back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, you might think that there'll be paint that goes underneath those stencils or masks. And guess what? It didn't. That's one of the perks of having that gel plate grab and hold those stencils, is it makes it easier to get those great crisp lines. Well, now I'm just about ready to put a piece of paper on here to take the print, but I'm not going to use plain paper. I'm actually going to use another gel print that I made that has a bunch of pattern on it, as well as a big hunk of paint stuck to it, which I just pulled off. But I'm going to pop that right on top of that. And this, using masks, using this technique, is a great way to use your gel prints to build another layer onto them. You might be wondering how I made that gel print. I used one of those fancy tools that I love, the dryer vent from the hardware store. Now, exactly how that's done, I have a video for you showing you how, and I'll have that link down below for you if you want to check that out. Now, because I am using an existing print on here, I'm not just using a blank piece of paper, which I absolutely could, but because it is an existing print, once I put it down, I've got good contact, I've rubbed it with my hand, so I know that paint is touching the paper, then I'm going to let it wait a minute or two before I take the pull. And that just lets the print grab up more of that paint, so you'll get a more complete coverage with it. Because the print that I used had those lines going straight up and down, that's why I lined up my towers vertically, so it would line up to the pattern that was already on that existing print. And now let's give it a bit of a wonky vibe and make some adjustments to these buildings. As I'm putting them on here, I'm giving them just a little bit of a tilt to add that wonkiness. And I'm also going to make sure that each of them touch somewhere at the bottom or the top, somewhere so they're having some kind of contact. The other thing that I'm doing is adjusting the height of some of them. Notice how there's some of it hanging over the bottom of the gel plate, because I want to get kind of a feeling of the rooftops flowing the way I want. And even if they're a little bit taller than what I want, it's a real easy fix. You just slide that stencil down the gel plate and magically they can be as short as you want them to be. And a little bit later in the video, you're going to see a very, very shortened version of one of the towers. Along with loving the shapes of buildings, I also really love the symbolism. The symbolism of windows and doors, the symbolism of the walls of the building, because to me, they represent all the stories that happen within their walls. What's come before them, what's happening now, and what will be. And that symbolism drives a lot of the choices that I make when I'm playing with these stencils. In a little bit, you'll see how it impacts an abstract print that I make using them. But for now, it's impacting it in the kind of paper that I'm going to use. You see, I've been thinking about the trailblazers, the people that came before us generations ago that have made possible some of the things that we have right now, some of the freedoms, some of the rights, that kind of thing. And as I'm thinking about that, I want to capture that kind of vibe. So that's why I chose to use old dictionary paper and stay with the black and white kind of vibe. And since I don't have a time machine to actually go back and hear those conversations, I can honor them in my gel prints. When you've got a stencil, you have, yes, the entire image, but you also have all of the parts that make it up. And so what we're going to do is take just the windows here and build a very abstract print. I'm going to isolate one part of this stencil and I'm going to repeat it over and over again here on the plate. I'm not trying to line anything up exactly. I'm not worried about precisely covering each one of the squares of the windows here. This is a very loose and quick way to build a pattern print. Now, windows are a very symbolic item and there are a lot of possible meanings for them. And so I think it's really very personal how it touches you, what you find most meaningful about something like a window. For me right now, it's reminding me of the view that I'm seeing, the window that I'm looking out, the way I'm viewing the world. Now, I mentioned that there can be a lot of symbolism with windows, and what if you'd like some ideas for it? Well, that's where I'm hoping that we'll all help each other out. So if you're willing to share what windows symbolize to you, what they mean to you right now, I'd love for you to put it in the comments. And if you're looking for ideas of what windows could symbolize, go ahead and read through those and see what your fellow creatives have shared. So when I've got a bold abstract print like this, it actually holds a lot of meaning for me. And so when I take this and I tear it apart and use it in a collage, or I use some of it in an art journal page, that meaning carries through for it. Now, this isn't the only look you can get using the windows from this collection. Let me show you some other prints made with windows. Now, this is art and play, and you can turn a stencil, you can make it go any direction you want to create a pattern with those windows. And you can also do them very, very neatly in rows. You have all sorts of options. And on this print, this was a neat and orderly version with that same stencil you saw me be not so neat and orderly with. It can give you a very different look, a different vibe to it. And then here's kind of an in the middle. It was a little bit on the grid, but also a little not on the grid as I kind of positioned those windows. And here on this teal one, this is a whole bunch of different windows being used. Not just one kind of window, but multiple types of windows. Along with the mask, you also get the stencil that goes with the buildings. And that's what I used to create the blue building in the middle of this gel print. And here are some more gel prints that I've made with the There Goes the Neighborhood collection. Now these prints do have more than one layer on them, and in order to create something like that, it's more than what I can put in one single video for you here. But if you'd like to know more about making complex prints with stencils, check out my online workshop, Stencilrific Layers. Well, let's use the stencil and the mask together this time to take this sort of ho-hum cleanup paper here and turn it into something much more interesting. So what I'm going to do is take one of the towers here, and I'm not even going to use the whole tower. I'm just going to use the very top of it. Now, by moving the stencil around, I can look through and see what it's going to look like when I'm done with the mask. And I can try it out in different places to see if I like the way the colors look. And I actually like the pink and orange side here better than the green, so I'm going to use this side. I'm going to get it lined up for what I want to see, and once I've got the position, then I can bring in the mask. So basically, the stencil is letting me get the spot where I want to put the mask. So it's going to be the guide for me when I take that mask and put it in place. So I'm going to set it inside the stencil, hold it in there with one finger, and then lift the stencil away. This way, I've got the mask positioned exactly where I want it. Now, that was a piece of washi tape there that I folded in half, or not really half, made those tape circles, like in elementary school. Now I'm bringing in just black paint and I'm stenciling around the edge because what I want is the silhouette. I don't want the windows that are in there for this look. So to create the silhouette, all I'm doing is using that cosmetic sponge and the paint around the edges. I'm not going all the way into it. So when I lift my mask up, what I will have, well, okay, so I did get a little bit in there. I got a little paint in there, but we'll just call that an oops. It'll be a great opportunity for me to add something to it later. Now, I actually want to do 3 of these in a row. And so I'm simply going to go through the process again. I'm going to line that stencil up where I want it and then place that mask in there. Now, you might be more skilled at this than I am, but I do need to hold that mask in place with my fingers when I'm lifting the stencil away to make sure it stays in its spot. Now my very fancy tape circle that I've got back there is kind of sneaking out over the edge of the mask, so I'm going to kind of tuck it back under there. All right, so once it's back in its place, it's not trying to run away, now I can bring in the paint. Now because I knew I wanted to put several of these on here, I wanted to do a row of them, I'm keeping the paint a little bit tight. And what I mean by that is I'm staying close to the edge of the mask. I'm not just going crazy and filling in the whole page yet, because I know I'm going to want to put that stencil there to put the mask in place to do a third one or a second one, that kind of thing. But this is also where it is so handy to have that stencil and mask combination, because when I go and put the third one on here, I know how close I can get it without getting into the black paint. And that's why I'm kind of sliding it over a little bit when I realize, oh, nope, I'm already in some of the black paint, because I want this wonderful silhouette here, so I don't want to be in any of the paint right now. My stencil has shown me where to put the mask. I can position it in there, and again, holding it in place with that finger, and then pulling the stencil away. Then I can go and fill it in. Now I'm going to really speed up the camera here because you know how this works. I'm going to pounce that paint right on there around the mask. Once I've got the last one filled in here, once I've got that last silhouette done, I'm then going to go back and just fill in the rest of the paper. So I turn it into an all black paper with these 3 towers peeking out on it. And so now I've taken a ho-hum cleanup paper and turned it into something far more interesting. Having the stencil lets you preview what the silhouette's going to look like, so you can get it positioned very carefully, very precisely before you put any of that paint on there. So here I've actually lined up part of the pattern there that's on this gel print so that the pattern actually fills out the little edges, the little lips that are on part of this tower. So, yep, there's a piece of that washi tape and a circle there to hold it in place. Now I'm going to just put some paint around it. Now I am a very impatient stenciler. I like to do things quickly, and when I'm doing that, I need to do a few things to help myself have neat and crisp lines when I want that, because I wish my hands would actually go this fast when I was stenciling. But one of the things that I will do is I will use a thick, heavy body paint. The other thing is, as I'm using the sponge, you'll notice that I'm pulling it away from the stencil. Basically, I'm dragging it away, and that reduces any paint running underneath it. I like using black paint when I'm doing this, but you bet you can use any color that you want, white, whatever you like. One of the reasons why I like black so much for this is it really puts a spotlight on the shape, the pattern, the things that are on that print. Now, along with using the stencils and the masks, you can also mix and match the windows. I'm going to use a gel plate to do it because it is the fastest way for me to do things, and impatient me loves doing things quickly. Now, these are the windows that are on the mask that fit inside this silhouette. But guess what? You can use other windows in there. I'm going to grab one of the masks from the warehouse stencil. I'm going to press it down so that the gel plate will grab it and hold it in place. And then I'm just going to brayer a thin layer of black paint over it. I am being careful to stay just on the windows to not go over the edge and get any of the black paint where I don't want it. I could have also done something like put a little post-it note right there to mask it off really easily, or an index card, that kind of stuff, but I decided to live on the edge. So now what I'm going to do is let this paint dry completely. Let the black paint completely and totally dry. Now the reason why you want to wait for it to be completely dry is because another layer of paint is going on top of it. I'm going to bring in some bright yellow paint here, and I'm going to brayer it around. I'm going to be generous with the paint because I want to have enough paint to get a solid amount of coverage so that color is really strong. And if it's too thin a layer of paint, sometimes those windows will get pulled up by the brayer, and I don't want that to happen. And by the way, if that does happen, it just makes for a great grungy window look. But as much as I said I wanted to be generous with the paint, I went a little overboard, which is something that I do now and then. And this is more paint than what I need. So all I'm doing is finding cleanup papers here and rolling some of the paint off onto the papers. That way it'll get used and become a layer in something else, and not a drop of paint has to be wasted. So now I'm going to lift up the stencil, get that out of the way, and now I'm going to put a piece of paper on top. A lot of times I use white paper, but today I'm feeling like using black cardstock for this one. So I'm going to put it on there, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a couple of minutes to dry. If I've got a thicker layer of paint on there, I might give it 2-3 minutes. If it's a really thin layer, it may only need a minute. Now this is not the only combination of windows you can put into this silhouette. Let me show you some of the others. So by just choosing different windows in there, you give it a very different look. Now when I was doing the pink building, when I put the windows in, I had 3 rows of them there, and I simply slid the stencil down and then did 2 more rows to fill that entire silhouette in. Now the green silhouette, that was using the windows from this tower. Now if you're wondering, can you take the windows from 2 different towers and put them in a silhouette? Yes, indeed, you absolutely can. You've got all sorts of options with this. There's something called reverse stenciling, and that's where you take a stencil or a mask and then you actually create that image. You print that, and I'm going to show you how to do that, and you kind of get 2 for 1 with this technique. Start by placing your mask onto the gel plate, and I press them down so that way the gel plate really grabs it and holds it in place while I'm brayering the paint over it. I really like this technique with black, but absolutely, you can use it with any color that you want to use. Making sure that I've got a nice coverage of paint onto that mask. I'm not being shy, I'm not being stingy with the paint, I'm being generous. Then I'm going to take that and put it paint side down onto the paper I want to create the image on. Now I've put a piece of scrap paper on top so it makes it easy for my hand to move around as I'm applying the pressure, and you do need to apply a bunch of pressure to this one to get a full and complete image to transfer. The other thing is you don't want to wait too long because this is paint, it's paper, they will stick together. So that's why I'm going to lift up that stencil promptly so that I have that image. But I've got all that great paint and that great image over on the gel plate. So I'm going to take that cleanup paper here and I'm going to put it on there and I'm going to take the pull. I'm going to get the print from that. And that's what I mean by this being a 2 for 1 kind of technique. Now, if you don't have a gel plate, you can absolutely still do the reverse stenciling. On a piece of plastic, a piece of transparency, a piece of plexiglass, that kind of thing, you can load up the mask with paint and make the reverse stenciling image. What you'll get when you take a print off of the paint left on whatever palette you're using, I can't say about that. I just know that on a gel plate, you can get prints like this. Well, thanks so much for joining me for today's play. I hope you've had fun and found this to be a useful video. If you've enjoyed it, I'd so appreciate it if you gave it a thumbs up. And if you know of somebody else that you think would enjoy this fun, share it with them so they can join in the play as well. Now, all of the stencils that I shared with you in this video are available at StencilGirlProducts.com. And if you'd like more ways, more ideas for using stencils, check out my blog at ColorfulJourney.com or my YouTube channel here. I've got a whole bunch of videos with stenciling. Thanks so much for letting me be a part of your colorful journey.